I'm Ingrid Nietzsche. I'm the Regional Rotary Foundation Coordinator for Zone 28. And on behalf of myself and the foundation teams on this call, we welcome each one of you to our session today. We had a very informative, interesting session yesterday. Thank you to all our foundation leaders in the zone, including the club leaders, for all the good work that you do on behalf of the foundation in your areas. A special welcome to our foundation assistant coordinators who are also on the call and who will help with the chat questions later. Today, Steve will prepare you to be the global grant go-to person in your district, the global grant expert, if you're not already there. Some of you I know are, but he will give us some extra tips and some additional information to assist us. He's going to cover topics such as the assessments and impact, as well as finding co-sponsors for some of your applications. We will have time for questions, as I mentioned. So if you do have a question that arises while you're listening to the session, please just place your question in the chat. I gave Steve's full introduction yesterday, and I know that we have many of the same members on this call today. So I'm going to just share that we are very grateful for Steve sharing his vast expertise based on the assignments and challenges that he has resolved in his over 10 years with Rotary International, working in numerous zones across the world. So Steve, a very special welcome to you. Delighted that you will share some of this very important information with our leaders tonight.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. I appreciate the introduction, and welcome to everybody who's on the call tonight, especially to those of you who are here for a second night in a row. I appreciate the time that you set aside this week. But to everyone, I hope that this is going to be an informative presentation about global grants. So I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. As Ingrid mentioned, I do plan to pause in the middle and we'll be able to take some questions there, just kind of take a breather, make sure that everybody is doing all right.
My God.
And then we'll continue. It'll be about, it will be a full hour. And if everyone could make sure that your mic is muted, or if one of my co-hosts is able to do that, that would be great. So we get started off on the right foot. You will be able to unmute yourselves later if you want to ask a question when it's time for that. But we will now get started. So as you know, this is about Rotary Global Grants. Yesterday was the district grant. And just for those who are here, who were not here last night, let me briefly introduce the regional grants officers that are working with zones 28 and 32. So you see there myself. I work with many zones in the USA. It's mostly zone 32, as well as districts in Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, and zones 2 and 3 of Japan. And then just below my picture, you'll see Renee Reiling. She works with most of the districts in zone 28. She's been with the foundation since 1997, and she manages grants taking place in districts in Canada, the United States, the Caribbean, and the Bahamas. Cecilia Walter has been with the foundation since 2013. She manages grants taking place in the districts in the United States, Canada, the Philippines, and also one zone in Japan. And then I included a picture of our payment coordinator, Grace Walquist. She's been with the foundation since 2020. If you've ever had a global grant approved, I'm sure you've heard from Grace, well, including district grants as well. She manages grant payments for the USA, Canada, as well as the South Pacific and East Asia, quite a large region. And just to give you a sense overall, Evanston has 23 regional grants officers, or RGOs, and we're paired up with each of the 523 districts around the world. The 3 district regional grants officers that you see on your screen, myself, Renee, and Cecilia, work with over 200 of those districts. So we really cover a wide range, as Ingrid mentioned earlier, and get to see a lot of variation. So today we're going to look at global grants, the life cycle and impact of global grants. In the first half, we're going to cover some of those statistics again with a little addition. If you were here last night, it's not completely the same. We're going to look at the life cycle of a grant, the Rotary Action Plan quickly, the impact building blocks briefly, and during this first half, you are welcome to put your questions in the chat. I will ask Sandy and Lynn to help make sure that I'm not missing any of the important ones that come in during the first half here. I'll pause in the middle, try to answer some questions, and then we'll continue for the second half talking about measurement, community assessments, and sustainability. Those are the components that, if you understand how they fit into a global grant, I believe makes you a go-to person and an expert in global grants for Rotary. And then finding partners. That seems to be a perennial topic that comes up, and I will do my best to present you with some new options for finding partners, and then some time for discussion and questions. So let's get started. First, just very quickly, what is a global grant? I'm sure most people on this call know, but just in case, these are more complex interventions with sustainability and measurable results that are built into the design. These activities can be humanitarian projects, scholarships, or vocational training teams. A key feature of these global grants is the partnership between a club where the project is going to take place and a club or district in another country. So we have international partners. They must align with an area of focus, one of our 7 areas of focus, with a minimum budget of $30,000. They also have a maximum World Fund award of $400,000, and grant sponsors can use a combination of district designated funds, cash, endowments, and the like. But the World Fund is used to match district designated funds at 80%. And as you probably know, these are our 7 areas of focus. Environment was added a few years ago. And now some of those statistics, just to give you an idea of the greater scope. I presented these yesterday, but really quickly, these are the statistics, audited statistics from last year, 2023, 2024. We had 485 district grants approved, which was up slightly from the year before that by 13. We had 1,287 grants, global grants approved, which was up from the previous year by 195. So last year was a little busier. An additional 14 million was awarded. Disaster grants were down a little bit last year, and that's mainly because of the support that we gave to Ukraine the previous year before that. So we had 106 disaster response grants last year, though, which is still quite a lot, at 4 million. And then the Programs of Scale grant, we've awarded 4 of those now at $2 million each, and this year we will be awarding the 5th. Now, to provide you with a little additional information, these are the unaudited grant statistics through December of 2024. So this is about as recent as I could get. So far, we have approved 336 district grants, which is pretty much on par with where we were last year at that time, 24.3 million in funding. Global grants, we've approved 544 so far at 33.5 million USD in funding. This is up slightly from where we were at that time, December, the year before. Disaster response, we've approved 41 so far at 1 million, and Programs of Scale, like I said, that'll be approved this year. So in addition, you'll see there that banner across the top. It says currently open global grants, 3,268. Of course, we've approved 544 so far in this program year. That means since 1 July. But there are still global grants that are open and active that are reporting every 12 months and contacting regional grants officers that we're overseeing. There's 3,268 of those. And a little bit more detail for you all. So far this year, we have approved 544 global grants, and this is the breakdown between the areas of focus. So you'll see the highest number there is disease prevention and treatment, and that's 215 humanitarian grants have already been approved, 25 scholarships, and 7 vocational training teams for a total of 16.7 million in total award. So that is by far, and tends to be, disease prevention and treatment tends to be the highest number of total applications, and you can also see in funding. The next is community economic development. We've had 47 humanitarian grants, 20 scholarships, and 1 vocational training team at 3.7 million. Water, sanitation, and hygiene, 59 humanitarian, 4 scholarships, and so on. So environment, as our newest one, is gaining traction. We've had 32 so far, 16 of them being humanitarian, 16 of them being scholarships. But people are really catching on to how to design these environmental global grants, which is great to see. Now, with more than 500 global grants approved so far this year and over 3,000 currently active, I wanted to just take a look at what the life cycle is. Most of you are probably familiar if we break this down into 3 phases. We have the application phase followed by payment and reporting. Pretty straightforward. The application phase, of course, is starts off with, you'll see the circles are what's done by yourselves, the members. So the grant application is submitted online, and sponsors are providing bank account information, and then square there, staff reviews the application. Step 3 really is the one that I think everybody would be focused on, because if you see there that circle that says missing information is supplied to staff, that is where we review an application, and we do try to get to them. It says at the bottom there, or no, it says, sorry, at the top. We try to get to them approximately 4 weeks, but at peak times, sometimes it can take longer. But really what does make the biggest difference in how long a review takes is how much information is in the application to begin with. And if we have to go back and ask for more, that's that orange circle. So our intent is to move these proposals forward rather than decline them outright. We rarely do that unless it just seems like there's too much of a gap to fill. We'll come back with questions. We'll come back to the sponsors to ask for additional attachments that we may need, maybe an updated invoice or something like that. And then hopefully the application goes to secondary review. Every application gets at least 1 secondary review. If it requires an area of focus review, it would have at least 2 secondary reviews. And then notifying sponsors hopefully of an approval. At that point, we would pay the application within 6 months, sometimes in a lump sum. If it's a larger amount, we'll ask for a payment schedule, often paying, say, for example, the first half at approval, and then after a progress report, the second half, something like that. But we ask the sponsors, what makes sense to you? Do you need 25% up front? Do you need 50% up front? And go from there. And then once payment is made, sponsors have 12 months to implement and report on progress of project completion, and that cycle is repeated every 12 months until the project is completed. So as I mentioned earlier, Rotary's action plan does call out what a global grant is intended to do, and that is to increase our impact, which I have outlined there on your screen. So I would also say the dotted line you'll see there is to increase our ability to adapt, to build a culture of research, innovation, and willingness to take risks. We, of course, are trying out new things. We're trying to help these communities in ways that nobody's helped them before. But we do need to have proven concepts, at least. We don't want to experiment on our communities. So quite a lot of research and preparation, project planning goes into the global grant before we approve it, right? So that being said, yes, we want to be flexible and adapt, and also engage all of our members, but we want to be, of course, careful with not only foundation funds, but also with the communities themselves. So what we're trying to do is get out this message about with this impact terminology that I think it's been out for a while now. Most of you have probably seen it. And it's nothing limited to Rotary. This is probably well known in most project management circles, is we're looking at the input which would be defined as the funding, the time, the training, and other materials that we invest when we approve a project. That's all going to be contained in an application, right? And then your intended output, which are the immediate results of activities that have taken place. For example, if you're going to train a certain number of people in sanitation techniques, how many people do you intend to train, and then tracking that in the report to say how many people were trained. The outcomes is a little bit more qualitative. We're looking at the intermediate results of our actions, such as changes in behavior in the target population. So maybe now that they have new wash basins that they didn't have before, the behavior is going to change because they're going to go and use those and build the habit. And then, of course, the last one we have is impact. And those are the positive long-term changes resulting from the project, right, from our actions. And these are measurable improvements that wouldn't have occurred otherwise. These are pretty hard to capture in a report that comes 12 months or 24 months after payment. So these are usually longer term. We may or may not capture them in a final report, but this is intended, this is really the intention, is to make that positive long-term change. So in order to do that, we require things like sustainability. Okay. So we're a little early on the pause here, but I do want to just pause because I kind of threw a lot out at you all at once.
Stephen?
So, yeah.
There's a question in the chat. I thought I could answer it, but I'll let you answer it. Is it possible to get a copy of the Zoom recording for the district grant review yesterday? And I'm assuming it's yes, as well as today's review as well.
Yeah. We probably should have mentioned that in the beginning. Yesterday's session was recorded. We have that all ready to go. We're probably gonna, I think the zone is going to post them all at once we have everything prepared, but I don't think it would take too long. Anyway, the recording will be offered to you through the zone site. I'm also providing all of these slides for the zone website to be posted there. So you're welcome to write things down and take pictures if you want to, but you'll have the real deal after the fact.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Your slides are excellent, Steve.
Oh, thank you. So were there any other questions? I did have a follow-up question from yesterday that I'm happy to answer now at this break. Unless there's a question on anything that I just presented. And a global grant go on
Eric
for
has
3
asked.
years.
Oh, Eric has asked. Yeah, there you got it.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. Yeah, so a global grant, we don't necessarily cut it off after a certain number of years. 3 years is not uncommon. So yes, it is definitely possible. What I would just say about that is with a 3-year global grant, you're looking at payment and probably at least 3 reports, right? 2 progress reports and a final report. And keep in mind that as officers change in Rotary every year, club presidents are changing, DRCs are changing, those authorizations, and this is something we'll get into. It's really important to maintain relationships to make sure that those reports are submitted. So yes, it can go on for 3 years, and those relationships are all the more important the longer your timeline is. Great question. Thanks,
I
Eric.
was asked.
All right, I don't see everybody, but I saw Kathy raise her hand. You don't have to raise your hands, because but go ahead, Kathy.
Well, so that leads to an interesting thing, because club presidents change. We've had a situation where one of their club presidents is no longer even a Rotarian. I mean, so it puts the district in jeopardy of things we have no control over. So I don't know what out do we have if the host club isn't present?
Right. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. We are going to cover this in a little bit, well, from a
Okay.
different angle tomorrow, but I'm happy to address it today. And that's just the fact that, well, a club president, it's always the current club president. So if your project is approved 1 year and then you're reporting the following year, it's going to be a different person for the most part. The club president usually is not a problem for being a member, because that's something that should be reported from time to time. There's, somebody doesn't tell us right away and we find out that a club president is no longer a member. And we need to make that change in the database. That can take a little bit of time. I think one of the things that I've found is a lot of these issues do involve the foundation taking some kind of action, or Rotary International, whichever side of that you want to say. Updating our database, or getting somebody access to the grant center is another common one. So feel free to reach out to us to help solve those. But tomorrow I'm going to outline a little bit some of the common issues that come up, so that you're all aware. And as district officers, it might help you to sort of think through, what can we do now? What information can we gather basically to provide to, say, a regional grants officer like me, so that I can, help move it along. And I'll say one more thing on this is, if your primary contact for a global grant is no longer a member, your regional grants officer that's assigned to that grant needs to change the primary contact from, it's usually going to be one of the secondary contacts. That's why we ask for 2 secondary contacts. So one of them is available to become the primary contact. And then that person can approve.
Okay, Stephen, there's another question from the chat. For how long can a global grant be open?
I don't know that we have cut them off necessarily. I think the intention is 4 years maximum. I know for scholarships, that's the intention, although I have had some PhD students that have asked for an extension, and, we've had them go longer than 4 years. Our concern isn't exactly that a grant is open for a certain amount of time. It's more that we're getting a report every 12 months and that we understand what the situation. Another good example of that is during the pandemic, progress was not able to take place with a lot of projects, and there were extensions. So extenuating circumstances do merit a longer timeline, but for the most part, I think 2 or 3 years is probably what most people aim for.
Thank you, Stephen. And another question. Is there a way to search the Grant Center feature of My Rotary to determine any global grant leads that are looking for participants to help fund or execute a global grant?
The Service Project Center. Yeah, thank you for that question. I actually didn't include this in my slides for the second half. I'll talk about some other things related to search on My Rotary, but I guess, yeah, thanks for reminding me. The Service Project Center is relatively new. It replaces what was called Rotary Showcase. And Rotary Service Project Center is designed specifically, you can use it on desktop or mobile, to find projects that are looking for sponsors and looking for funding. And I know that a lot of members do this outside of Rotary International and the foundation, but we're trying to make a place that's very useful, and eventually with a map feature and things like that, to really comprehensively understand the Rotary activity that's going on around the world. And that's for projects that are in the planning process. And you can also filter for projects that are currently underway. So if you're planning, you can see, is there anything else going on around where I'm planning to do something? And after your project is complete, to promote your project. So the Service Project Center is the place to do that.
Thank you, Stephen. And another one?
Yep.
Can
We'll take one
global, this is the last one I see. Can global
thanks.
grant funding support vocational service training project? If yes, what is the max funding and duration of the funding?
Yeah, so vocational training teams are part of the global grant along with humanitarian and scholarship type projects. Vocational training teams follow the same rules as any other global grant. So really there is no maximum amount of funding. The maximum amount of world fund that can be requested is 400,000. That would apply to vocational training teams as well. Those don't tend to have very high budgets. So I don't think that you'd have too much of a concern there.
Thank you. And that's all we have right now on chat.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, let's continue. And this slide, we're going to get into a little bit more detail now in the second half, as you can see. We're looking at the essential parts of a global grant, and measurement is very important to this, right, to this cycle. So you can see the little start arrow there for the project design portion, right? And you can see at the bottom of the screen is where it shows application. So really what's intended is that there's a lot of things happening before an application is submitted, right? So you have the project design portion, which consists of working with the community where the project is going to take place to understand, what's the issue essentially, and then what's the cause of the issue. What is the project going to take on, and what are the goals of the project going to be? That's all that first section there, and a very important part, right? Then we have project planning, which consists of a measurement plan and collecting baseline data. That comes in for any type of global grant, really, but some more than others, we're asking for what is the baseline data, because in the global grant application, we're asking, what are you going to measure? We need to know what our starting point is to know how we're going to measure what the project is achieving. So a good community assessment should contain that baseline data. If it doesn't, that's often one of those things. And if you remember in the global grant life cycle, I pointed out in step number 3, we have to ask for more information. Sometimes we have to go back and say, do you have baseline data for this particular measure that you've entered in the application, but we don't understand our starting point. Then for the third section is project implementation. Of course, that's after approval. And that's going to involve monitoring and evaluation. The global grant application asks for a name of a person or an organization that will be in charge of monitoring and evaluation. That should be a person who's in the host community, the person who's in the community where the project is taking place. Having somebody fly over to monitor and evaluate it, not only usually costs money, but can't really be done continuously or for the person to really understand very well. But also, we'll touch on this a little bit later, but I'll make the point here. For sustainability, you want them to understand how to monitor and evaluate the project as it's happening, so that when the project is over, they can continue to do that. And then lastly, learning and adapting by reporting on progress and final output or outcome. And as I mentioned earlier, sustainability, this is a big part of, I think, a main component of a global grant. We have a slightly updated graphic there that you've probably seen before, but the first part there that it shows is start with the community. And the important thing there is to know that a community assessment is required for all global grants. This is from a number of years ago. If you've done anything with global grants, you're aware of that. And we're asking you to engage directly with the community members. I know one question that comes up quite often is, what if we have a cooperating organization? Can they do the community assessment? Yes, you can work with a cooperating organization to conduct the community assessment, but keep this in mind. It has to be a Rotary project. So if the community organization, if the cooperating organization in the community is already doing something similar, we want to know what makes this different, right? So if they're already collecting data, that's great, but we want them to talk with the Rotary members, the sponsors, talk with the community to come up with your project, right? So a lot of people write checks in Rotary, but our grants are not just writing checks. So that's an important thing to know. Yes, you can work with a cooperating organization to do a community assessment, or the host club, which is even better. But That's important to have face-to-face engagement with the community. Now that leads into the second part there, which is encouraging local ownership. And that is all about engaging the community and finding out who those key members are. I have had a few global grant applications that name a number of people in the community that have already agreed to work on the project. They're excited, their roles are defined. We understand, that they're excited about the outcomes and they're going to be there after the project is over. So encouraging local ownership means that finding those key community members, sometimes we call them champions of the project, so that they can sustain the momentum after the project and after the grant funds are spent. The third, it says provide training. That's traditional training as you think of it, but also human capacity building, right? We're changing behavior in a sense. That's changing their capacity to do new things, do it better, have a better lifestyle and outcomes. The next one there is buy local. It seems pretty simple, but actually you'd be surprised at how this can be overlooked. And sometimes it's because, we know of a great resource somewhere else, but not in the local community. The problem is sometimes problems can come up with shipping and customs and things like that, that nobody foresaw, and nobody likes that. But even more importantly would be to make sure that there are local parts available and a way to maintain and repair any equipment when the project is over. So if it's purchased locally, then most likely that equipment is going to be able to be maintained and repaired for a long time. Sustaining financial support, where it says there, find local funding. This is often getting the buy-in from local sources, tend to be government, hospitals, companies, other organizations that have a vested interest to continue these activities in the future. And then lastly, it's critical to have ways to measure our success. Of course, this goes back to impact. We want to know what our impact was, so that we know if we're achieving what we sought to achieve, how far things have come, and maybe how far things still need to go. And lastly, you'll see the conducting community assessments image on your screen. That's actually a new handbook. We had a previous resource on community assessments. This is a new design that was just released last year. You can find it on My Rotary now. I'll tell you a little bit about searching on My Rotary soon to find this, but I think it's a great resource. We've improved the design. Our design team did a great job so that you could see all those. On the right side of that image, you can see a number of words and page numbers. Those are all links. You can click around very easily to jump to different sections as you need. And that table of contents essentially is on every page. So it's easier to navigate, but the layout is nice and understandable. Okay, how many of you are District Rotary Foundation chairs? I suspect a lot of you. Some of you have put that into your name. Thank you. Where your name is on Zoom. And this is for our DRFCs on the call. One, I talked about this yesterday, but I'll mention it again. We have a new requirement for district qualification that by this July 1st, DRFCs must complete Learning Center courses. There's 3 courses in the Learning Center online that need to be completed. The district committee basics. One person has their mic unmuted. Thank you. Okay. The district committee basics, the District Rotary Foundation Committee intermediate course, and then the grant management seminar. You only have to do this once as you're becoming DRFC. And after that, there's a recertification course that we recommend that you do just to be up to date on any new policies. The second big bullet there is we have more DRFC focused education. So we have a new DRFC handbook that you can find online, as well as we did 2 webinars last year in multiple languages to try to support our DRFCs better. And we also have a presentation based on that DRFC handbook to, so you don't just have to read through it, but there's a way to go through it step by step as a group as well. So we'll be arranging that. We have quarterly mailings that we're planning to go out directly to our DRFCs. And the last one on there, you may have heard, the trustees recently introduced term limits. This might not sound like it's supporting DRFCs if some of you enjoy the job and have been doing it for a long time. But with a 3-year term limit, hopefully there is better succession planning. That is something that is included in the handbook. We included it well before the trustee decision, because that's always a good idea for succession planning. But yes, we hope that our District Rotary Foundation chairs, the superstars that you are, can go on and do other things and different roles in the foundation and with your districts and zones. So hopefully this is a plus for people. I know that there may be some questions in the chat. I'll just mention now that if you look in the trustee minutes on the decision, because this is a new decision, they're allowing for a 4th year right off the bat if there needs to be a transition. Things still need to get put into place. This is just a screenshot of the online grant management seminar. I'm sure you're aware. I wanted to make sure everybody realizes I'm talking about an online resource. I know Ron Webb is on the call. He is an expert in the Learning Center, so just ask him. Just want to shout you out, Ron. And one more, the My Rotary site search, and this is related to the question that came up earlier. This is just a tip that I'll give you is if you type in the word handbook into the My Rotary site search, right? There's a little magnifying glass on My Rotary in the upper right-hand corner. If you click on that, you'll see you can search the site, members, or clubs. And if you just type in handbook, you will find a number of resources, but in there you'll find the District Rotary Foundation Chair Grants Handbook. You'll find the Rotary Impact Handbook, which is also new, and that Conducting Community Assessments Handbook that I showed earlier. All of those are new or recently redesigned, and I think will be very helpful primary resources for you. And then, of course, you'll see on the right side of the screen there, resources and references. That's from the Global Grants webpage on My Rotary. If you scroll down to most of our pages, you find a lot of these resources and references. It's just a string of links, but you can often find everything you need there. Okay, now a big question that keeps coming up, and hopefully this will be helpful, is finding and getting to know your partners. So how do you find someone to do a global grant with? We already talked about the Service Project Center, and that is a great way to look for partners, look for projects that are looking for partners even. So, but I've just put a few bullet points here, some things to consider. So the first one there is similar goals or values. And I just want to highlight one of many resources around that, but it would be the Rotary Action Groups, right? If you are a member of a Rotary Action Group, most of them are aligned with an area of focus. This is a great way to find another club or a member in an area where you'd like to do a global grant, or get support from an international sponsor for a global grant who has a similar interest in, say, water, sanitation, and hygiene. So that's a great place to look. Another one is, what is the relationship to the focused community, right? One suggestion would be contacting a member of the cadre of technical advisors. The cadre are worldwide, and you can do a search for a cadre in a certain country. Contacting them to help with project design is something that we recommend, but also they may have an awareness of some of the activity in that area and relationship of a community to other Rotary entities. So they're a great resource. We are also doing our best from the foundation to support our cadre members as much as we can. And then, of course, the community assessment itself. You may be interested in doing something in a certain community and have not identified a host sponsor yet. Someone in the community may be aware of members in the community or surrounding community who are Rotarians. So don't overlook the members of the host community itself to find people there that they are already connected with, right? We would think it's the other way around because they're all part of the Rotary world, but explore the community itself. This happens quite a lot. The third bullet point, there's smaller scale collaboration. Maybe people meet at Rotary Convention or other big events like that. But I also wanted to call it the project fairs. So we have on our website, on My Rotary, you can search for project fairs. That's actually the image that's on the right side of the screen. There's a button there that says visit the project fairs map, and it will show you all the upcoming and past project fairs, where they're happening, when they're happening. And just to highlight one of them that just ended on Monday, I believe, was the Columbia Project Fair in District 4271. One of my colleagues traveled from Evanston down there to be present. A lot of people go to these to find out what projects are happening. Project fair participants often work with their local cadre members ahead of time to vet projects that will be presented at a project fair. So that's a bit of reassurance to know that the projects are well designed. And project fairs can look different ways, right? It might just be almost like a house of friendship at the convention where there are a number of booths. You can go around and talk to people. They may have presentations where people are presenting about a project that they would like you to have interest in, give you the details about it. And sometimes it's a roundtable discussion and things like that. So I think these are a great place to find project partners, of course. And if you didn't know, you can use district grant funds to attend a project fair. The reason for that is district grant funds are a way to facilitate grant activity. So grant management seminar is another thing that can be included in district grant funds. Participation in a project fair is something that can come from district grant funds. Now for the search function on My Rotary, you can search the members, and included in that is searching by role. So one role that I would recommend if you're looking for partners is the District International Service Chair. Right? The District International Service Chair is the head of our district resource network for each district. And you can find these officers through member search. And if there's one in the area where you'd like to do a project, reaching out to them is a great way to do it. Of course, if you know the District International Service Chair in your district, they might know each other as well. So, but if you just want to do some research on your own, you can do that through the member search. You can also find a club through the meeting location on My Rotary, see where you want to do a project and what clubs are in that area. And then the last two bullets there are foundation reports, which I'm going to cover on the next slide. And the final one, club management, which I am going to talk about more on Thursday, along with my colleagues from stewardship. So for foundation reports, if you're not aware, there's a little bit more access to these foundation reports. Any member can access them, but grant reports, I believe if you are a District Rotary Foundation chair, you have access to them. Two of these reports that I'll point out, so it's under the My Rotary, or if you scroll down a little bit, just to the right of where the Grant Center link is, you'll find foundation reports there as well. And if you scroll all the way down, I don't know why grants has to be at the bottom of that page, but if you scroll all the way down, you'll find grant reports, as you can see on the right side of the screen. And there's a number of them there. Two of them that I have highlighted is the grant participation report and grants by sponsor. So again, I'm always happy to help with things like this. I think most regional grants officers are, but if you want to do a little bit of research ahead of time, I think these will help. So the grant participation report can show you, sorry, that's a little bit small, but it'll show you by district and club number if there has been participation in a global grant for a particular district in a particular program year. So for example, I did a search for 2024 from that district in Columbia, and it shows that 11 clubs have participated in a global grant as financial contributors. 5 have been primary sponsors to a grant. So if you take the ID number from a club, that will show in the report as well, that has participated as a primary sponsor of a grant, then you can do a grants by sponsor search. If you look up grants by sponsor, plug in that club number, and it will show you which grants that they are currently sponsoring. So something that you can look at there is, when that grant was approved, when is their next report due date, right? If they're up to date on reporting, you're probably going to see a due date in the future. So that's one indication that things are on the right track. And then you'll also see the project description on that report. All those project descriptions are written by the regional grant officer that reviews the application originally. So those tend to be very succinct and accurate descriptions. And those are in English. We always write our project descriptions in English, even if the project title is in another language. Okay, and just some quick resources. I wanted to show you an image here really quick of the new Guide to Global Grants. This is being updated as we speak. Languages are done. We're putting on final touches. And that's going to be, again, the same format as I showed before for conducting community assessments. It's going to have the table of contents along the right side, and you can click and jump to any page relatively easily. A side note for those of you, we didn't talk a lot about scholarships. I just happen to be one of the grants officers that does work on scholarships quite a lot. We decided to fold our supplement for global grant scholarships into the Guide for Global Grants so that you no longer have to manage two separate documents. It's all going to be contained in a Guide to Global Grants. It made it a little bit longer, but I think it's worth it. Of course, you also have the Global Grants page on my Rotary, the Learning Center, the grants staff. You should also know on that Global Grants page, you'll find all the area focus guidelines. These give different project types in detail. We're trying to put out any information that regional grants officers have to make sure that you have that as well. We want to be on literally on the same page. And some other planning resources. I mentioned some of these, the Cadre for Technical Advisors, the Rotary Action Groups, the district resource networks we mentioned, and then also Rotary Community Club. These are more popular in some areas of the world than others. But kind of I referenced these earlier. If you're asking in a community, what Rotary entities do you work with? They may say a Rotary Community Club. For example, in the Philippines, there's a lot of these. So something to keep in mind. Okay, so we will stop there, take any questions. I think there are more in the chat. And we'll
Okay, Stephen, one
share
question.
so we can see everybody. Okay.
Sorry. Can you explain how we get in touch with the cadres to help in the design of projects, example, a WASH project?
Yeah, well, Stewardship is always happy to, if you write to stewardship@rotary.org and you give them some details on where you'd like to do your project, what country or community, what type of project it is, they can, this is a great way to do it because they can take a look at what cadre members have expertise in a certain area of focus, and maybe they've already vetted a number of projects and we know that they really produce high quality work. Any of the cadre members are qualified. They're vetted just to become a cadre member, but Stewardship can provide a little bit more information about their expertise.
And another question, what is the difference in roles of the DISC and the grants subcommittee chair? And the second part of that question, are Rotaract clubs eligible to be a host of a global grant?
Okay, two very different questions and good ones. So the difference between the roles of the District International Service Chair and any other officer really is pretty well defined. I believe the District International Service Chair is included in our, we do have a resource on the different roles that all the officers have. International service chairs, mainly what we want from them is to understand the international connections between various districts. And we really want those people to be plugged into the district resource network, right? All those other resources that I mentioned, like the interest groups, like the Rotary Action groups, they should sort of have their finger on the pulse for that type of thing. A grant subcommittee chair, by contrast, has a bit more of a narrow function. Like I could say the DGSC is absolutely part of the application for the district grant, right? And often the administration of the district grant. They're a prime component of that. The DISC usually is not related to the district grant. So there's probably a lot of differences, but those are just some. Rotaract clubs are eligible to host a global grant. They can be the host or they can be the international sponsor. For now, we are asking that, one, they have had some experience in the past with planning a global grant to some extent with a Rotary club before they become a primary sponsor, either on the host or international side. If they are a primary sponsor, we're not quite ready for two Rotaract clubs to be co-sponsors. One of them should be a Rotary club and the other a Rotaract club. But we are encouraging them to take on that, and we have had global grants with Rotaract clubs as I believe host and international. I think the first one was in Mongolia.
Another question, can a host club include administrative fees, example, supervision, coordination in the budget of a global grant?
That's a great question. Our grant funds should be going to the community, right? They should be going towards making sure that that community is receiving as much of it as possible, not, in various ways. The host club can be a really key component of making these grants work, especially we do have an allowance for project management. So that's probably where something like that's going to come in if you've had it come up before. Project management requires somebody with legitimate skills in project management. I've often seen people say, well, if this person has been a primary contact for 10 different grants, doesn't that make them qualified as a project manager? No, not necessarily. We want them to have some professional project management skills. If that's the case and they're providing a professional service, then that person could serve as a project manager, and we allow in the terms and conditions of the global grant for 10% of the budget to go towards project management. If there's no conflict of interest, then it could be a member of Rotary.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And the last question I see on chat, and I don't know if it's directed to you or Ingrid, but it's from Kathy Gallagher. What did I see about District Foundation Rotary chairs at not holding other positions?
That I don't think that I mentioned that. Ingrid, you might have information about that as well. Do you want to answer that, or I can?
There are some regional leadership positions where it is recommended that the individual is not currently holding a DRFC position or of similar responsibilities.
May I speak to that?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Yeah. We have had instances where the DRFC was also the governor-elect.
Mhm.
And other opportunities which are suggest that there's some leadership development issues in the district, suggest that the person involved cannot clearly do both jobs at the same time. And so that is correct. It's a new rule. It was put in last fall at the same time as the 3-year rule. So we realize it'll take a little while for this to play through, because there are people who are currently in that situation. But generally speaking, that is correct. A DRFC cannot have another time-consuming Rotary job. I know of at least 1 or 2 exceptions to that who are on this call tonight.
Yeah, and
Those are.
I'm one of those exceptions. This is Dean Rawes. It had to go to the Board of Trustees
Yeah.
to give permission for me to be the DRFC and a president-elect of my club and still be in the positions that I am in others. And it was purely because this law caught us in a space in between. So
Right. The trustees are allowing these. Obviously, if a district has got a succession plan or whatever going, we don't want to upset that. We do want to move forward in a couple of years so that we don't have these situations going on. And I realize that it's difficult with small districts, et cetera. But it plays to the weak points to have too few people doing too many jobs. Thanks.
And
Yeah,
Stephen, there's
thank you
one
so much.
more question on chat. How can a district manage clubs from going into the grant center and entering the application without being qualified?
You just have to wag your finger at them, I guess. We don't have we don't have a way to prevent them from doing that. I've seen some pretty interesting situations. People are allowed to enter, a claim to DDF and all sorts of things. However, the authorization process in the Grant Center, as frustrating as it can be at times when you're trying to get an application submitted or that report that's about to be overdue or even is overdue, and you need those authorizations. That's what they're for, especially the DDF authorizations. They have to be cleared by the DRFC and the district governor. So, we're not accepting anything. You're not having any DDF being removed until we get those authorizations. And the same thing goes with the applications. If the DRFC is not authorizing that, it will not be submitted. So we can't stop them from entering an application, but you can stop it from being submitted. And
Thank you,
can
Stephen.
request
That's
that
all I
it
see on
yeah,
chat.
you can
There was
request that it
there
be
was one other
deleted
question
as
here.
well.
There was one other question. I think it's more of anyway, it's an easy one, but I'll give it to you. How does a district transfer DDF to a project sponsored by another district? That's just an administration thing, but I'll let you answer that, Steve.
How does a district transfer DDF to a project sponsored by another district? I think Bob, what you're asking is if you're contributing DDF to a global grant application, and that's simply done into the application. The DDF authorizations are done just the same. You're just not a primary sponsor on that application. If I didn't get that right, let me know. If I didn't answer your question, let me know, and I'll try again. Bob, you have your hand up?
Yes, well, I was just going to say in the last year, I have had two global grants that came to me for authorization, and I said, what? Because the people that were involved in the grant actually, when they're printing the district numbers in, missed by one. And so, like we're 5550, and I think, and it was 5505, because just when they're typing, they put it in. And so when it came to me, and so, I mean, I right away said, I'm not authorizing this until, because we're not involved. And you and your colleagues were very quick to go back to that district and get them to change, and everybody went on their merry way. But it does happen. And so, as you say, it's the authorization that if you get the request and you say what, and then that's when the stop is, because anybody can put numbers in there, but it's the two people that have to authorize, and because it is for DDF, it is the district governor and the DRFC that have to do that. So, and if we don't do it, and so there is
Okay.
really
Thanks,
good
Bob.
stuff. So thank you.
Yeah,
So
and I see Lauren, you have your hand up, and then
last
yeah, we're at
question.
6 o'clock. Yeah, okay, yeah, we're at time, so can we
Go
take this
ahead,
last
Lauren.
question?
Mhm.
Yeah, Steve, more of an appeal, and this is dealing with kind of war-torn countries. And I know these guidelines are in place, but quite often they don't work in war-torn countries where When you have I say water fountains in Ukraine as the example, and you're trying to put 900 in across the country, it's not a localized community, and it's really hard to get a community needs assessment for 400 cities. And so all we ask is, please be compassionate a little bit that way, because I think what we're trying to do is the right thing. And ultimately, these guidelines get in the way of accomplishing that. And they run out of their DRC monies. Otherwise, we would do that way because it's the easiest way to do it. But I really do appeal to us that when we're dealing with Gaza and Ukraine and some of these war-torn countries, that sometimes we just have to look at the context.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thanks for the
Thanks.
comment, Lauren. I
Thanks,
appreciate
Lauren.
that.
Before I say an official thank you to Steve, I just want to mention that those of you who are receiving my communications bi-weekly, they go out to every district governor and district foundation chair. In that PALS document, which outlines all the president-elect assemblies across the zone, there is a resource page, and on that resource page, the new resources that Steve mentioned tonight are listed there, including the new DRFC and the other handbook, et cetera. So it's a worthwhile document for you to use as you see fit in your districts. And hopefully it will help enhance some of your president-elect assemblies. So Steve, wow, another stellar session tonight. I don't know, I learned something new every time I hear you present. I want to compliment you on your new slides. I think they're excellent and certainly would be valuable for some of you to use in presentations to your clubs or perhaps even for your sessions that are coming up. I want to thank everyone who's on the call. I appreciate you taking your time to share ideas, ask questions, and what's the bottom line? We're all there to support our districts. So thank you. And we look forward to seeing some of you or all of you tomorrow evening when we do reporting and stewardship.